Okay. Alright, so basically on Friday, we talked about imaginary numbers, right? So now we can solve every quadratic whether there's a negative or not. So now this section is being able to solve any power, any polynomial, so third, fourth, fifth, sixth, etc., if it doesn't factor. Okay? So we're going to use your synthetic division. You might have to use quadratic formula. We're going to be finding all the zeros. Today we're just going to talk about rational zeros. Rational zeros do not have square roots and do not have imaginary numbers. Okay? Okay, so the rational zeros test. This is when you're trying to find so you use this when you're trying to find the possible zeros. So you would do factors of the constant. Okay, so factors, those are what you multiply to get a number. So like factors of 6 would be 1 and 6 and 2 and 3. Okay, factors of 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and 12. And you're always going to have a positive and a negative. Okay, the constant, that's the number at the end. That's the number that doesn't have a variable. Leading coefficient is usually the very first number, but if it's not in order, it's the number in front of the highest exponent. Okay?
That's my first years. You have all
That's disgusting.
He's not ready to do your last thing.
That's why I'm confused. I told you to go.
Okay, so when you're listing all the possible rational zeros. So here's your keyword, possible. You're not actually solving anything on these. Okay? So first thing I'm going to do on top is I'm going to do the factors of the constant. Okay, your constant is 3. Don't worry about if this is a plus or a minus. Okay, so what are your factors of 3?
1 and 3.
1 and 3. So each factor can be positive and negative. So I'd have plus or minus 1, plus or minus 3. Okay, then I'm going to divide these numbers by the factors of the leading coefficient. So my leading coefficient is 1. What are my factors of 1? 1. Okay, so I'm literally going to take every number on top, divide by every number on bottom. So 1 divided by 1 is 1, and 3 divided by 1 is. Those are your possible rational zeros. Okay, I don't care about the order. So like, we're going to do 45 on this one. If you want to do 1, then 45, that's fine. I go in numerical order. Doesn't matter as long as you have all the options there. Okay. Now, we don't care about the middle parts when we're finding possibilities. We'll care about it once we find solving. We don't care about it when we find possibilities. Is everybody okay on the first one? Okay, now if you see that the number in front is 1, you don't have to show that you divided by 1. Okay, I would just say, okay, it's divided by 1, those are my possibilities, I'm done. Okay, so I want to do factors of 45, and I'm going to go in order, you don't have to. So I have plus or minus 1, plus or minus 3, plus or minus 5, plus or minus 9, plus or minus 15, plus or minus 45. Okay, I'm going to divide that. What are my factors of the leading coefficient? 2 and 1. So I'm gonna divide all those numbers by 1 and all those numbers by 2. Well, when I divide them by 1, I get the same number. So I have plus or minus 1, plus or minus 3, plus or minus 5, plus or minus 9, plus or minus 15, and plus or minus 45. Then I have to go back and divide them all by 2. So then I would have a half, 3 halves. Now, if you want to put 1 1/2, that's fine. Okay, I just rather leave it in proper, save me time. Plus or minus 5 halves, plus or minus 9 halves, 15 halves, and 45 over 2. Those are all possibilities. How many actual answers would this problem have if we were finding all the zeros? Anybody tell me?
24.
This would have 4 answers.
What?
These are possibilities, but I'd actually only have 4 total answers. How many answers would I have number 1? 3. Okay, how do we know this? Okay, whatever the highest exponent is how many actual answers you have. So these are possibilities. No way all these are going to work because you only have 4 total answers. These are just possible zeros. Because that's what's going to do the next part. We got to find possibilities.
Why did you think it was That's okay, I was gonna say you didn't like that. It would have been 24 infinity. Mine makes more sense than yours. Because I was thinking all that. I was actually adding on it. All the numbers in between. The numbers.
Okay, so now we're going to find all the rational zeros. So when we're solving, we're going to have nothing that has square root. So if we get an answer that has a square root, that's the one that's not going to count for this. And we're going to have no I, so no imaginary numbers. So keyword here will be our rational zeros. The video that you're watching for tomorrow is when you have all the zeros. You're finding all of them. So I know some of you have not watched very many videos. I would highly recommend you watch tomorrow's. You're going to have lots and lots of questions on your homework. Okay? Okay, first step is listing all of your possible zeros. So just what we did on problems 1 and 2, that's our first step. So I'm going to do factors of 6 divided by factors of 1. So my possibilities are 1, 2, 3, and 6. Okay, do I need to divide those by 1 or can we do that in our head? Okay. I'm assuming we can do it in our head. Okay, then your next step is you have to find one of these that work. Okay, the reason why they're called zeros is when you plug them into the equation, they make the equation 0. Mind blown? So what you're going to do, I don't care which one you start with, you got to find one of these numbers that work. I like to start with the smallest number possible and check it. So you can do it in your head or use a calculator. We're going to plug 1 in for all of the x's, and we're going to see if this gives us 0. So this will be 1 minus 6 plus 11 minus 6, which is 0. So this is one of my answers. If it doesn't work, then you go try a different number. So you keep plugging in until you find one of the numbers that works. After you find this number, you do synthetic division with it. Okay? Hopefully it should be a reminder, racking your brain from Algebra 2. So this goes on the outside and you list your coefficients. So then I bring down the first number. multiply, 1 times 1 is 1, add down is -5, 1 times -5 is -5, add down is 6, 1 times 6 is 6, add down is 0. Okay, so we were x cubed, we divided once, so now we're at x squared. So this is x squared minus 5x plus 6. Okay, once you get to a squared, you either factor it or quadratic formula. So those are your two options. So does this one factor? Does anything multiply to give me 6 and add to give me -5? -2 and -3. So this would be x minus 2, x minus 3. And then I set them both equal to 0, and so on. So I would get x equals 2, x equals 3. And then you're going to take all of your answers and put them in solution sets. So what are all of my answers?
1, 2, and 3.
1, 2, and 3. So don't forget about this number, we count first. Doesn't matter the order. You need to put them all together in solution sets. And don't forget about this one, the one you found first.
It's true.
You should have went out and get a picture of the phone. Oh yeah, I slipped in these books. You see it? I was like, oh, you said it was books. Okay, well. I don't know if I don't want that to hurt me. Who said it? Lisa.
Okay, same thing on number 4.
Oh, okay.
So if I want to find my possibilities, I'm going to do factors of 1 divided by factors of 2. So factors of 1 are just 1. Factors of 2, I have 1 or 2. So my possibilities are 1 plus or minus 1 and plus or minus a half. Okay, so after you find your possibilities, plug something in, see if it works. So I always just go in order. So I try 1. Okay, so if I plug 1 in for the x's, I would have 2 plus 3 minus 1, which is 4. Okay, that's not 0. So this is not one of your answers. So then you can either go try a half, or I would try the negative next. Huh?
There's 3 answers and there's 3 left.
Well, for rational zeros, that would be fine, but if you had real zeros, these don't include your square roots in your eyes. And sometimes you have multiple zeros. So you still gotta go through the whole process. I know rationally in your head that makes sense. But. Okay, so I put in -1, I would have -2 plus 3 minus 1, which is 0. Okay, so that's an answer. Okay, when I do synthetic division, don't forget when I put my numbers here, why am I putting a 0 in there?
You don't have an X.
Because you don't have an X. So those numbers go in order, and if something's missing, you put in a 0. Okay, then I bring down the first number, multiply, so I get -2, add down to get 1, multiply to get -1, add down to get -1, multiply to get 1, add down to get 0. So I'm left with 2x squared plus x minus 1. Okay, when you're doing synthetic division, if you don't get 0 as your remainder, either you've done synthetic division wrong or you have a wrong number here. You should always on these get remainder of 0. Okay? Let's see if this factors. Multiply to get -2 add to get 1 would be 2 and negative 1. So I'm going to split the middle. So I have 2x squared plus 2x minus 1x minus 1. Factor by grouping. First one I can factor out is 2x. Left with x plus 1. Second one I can factor out is negative 1. Left with x plus 1. So this factors into x plus 1, 2x minus 1. So when you set those equal to 0 and solve, you get x equals negative 1 and x equals a half. That means negative 1 is a multiple 0. So if you'll see, negative half actually doesn't work. So my answers, now if you want to write negative 1 twice, you can, but you don't have to. So my answers are negative 1 and a half.
So how come now it doesn't have 3 zeros?
Yeah, it
Negative
does.
one's multiple.
It has 1 0, 2 zeros, 3 zeros.
You just don't
So you-
have
so you
right.
just
You
take
just
it one
don't have.
It's a multiple 0.
once.
It means when you're graphing, usually when you have zeros, it crosses through and it keeps going. When you have multiple zeros, once it hits that 0, it changes direction. Okay. Okay, we're gonna do one more.
That would be impressive, honestly. Like one of my awesome staples. You should do that. Yeah. How I'm doing first.
Okay, now this one it's gonna have a lot of possibilities. If it's not asking for possible zeros, you don't have to write them all out separately if you don't want to. Okay, I mean, I'm gonna write it all combined, but I'm not gonna divide it all out separately. If I need to get into a bunch of fractions, then I will. Okay, so I'm gonna do my factors of 24. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, 12, and 24. And then the factors of 9, 1, 3, and 9. I'm going to try all the whole numbers first before I ever try the fractions, so I'm not going to divide it all out. Only time you have to is on the directions that say list all the possible. Okay, so the first I'm going to try is 1. See if 1 works. So that'd be 9 minus 9 minus 58 plus 4 plus 24. That gives me negative 30. Okay, so is 1 a 0? No. Okay, so now I'm going to try negative 1. So if I do negative 1, I would have 9 plus 9 minus 58 minus 4 plus 24. That gives me negative 20. Okay, also not a 0. So that means these don't work, so now I'm going to go find the 2's. And I can't do this in my head, somebody's calculator, so that would be 144 minus. Okay. 2 gives me negative 128. So 2 also doesn't work. Okay, so I'm going to try negative 2. Anyone else trying this? I'm just waiting on the. Okay, this gives me 0. Okay, so that's my first answer that works. So that means I'm going to do synthetic division with that number. So if I list my coefficients, this would be 9, negative 9, negative 58, 4, 24. Okay. Bring down the first number, multiply negative 18, add down as negative 27, multiply, get 54, add down as negative 4, multiply, get 8, add down as 12, multiply, get negative 24, add down and get 0. Okay, so I was at x to the 4th, so I divided once, and now I'm going to be at x cubed. So I have 9x cubed minus 27x squared minus 4x plus 12. Okay, now if this factors by grouping, factor by grouping. If it doesn't, then we have to go find another number and do synthetic division with it again. A lot of times when you get down to this point, if there's still 4 terms, it's going to factor by grouping. Okay, so let's try. So if I group, I can factor out a 9x squared. I'm left with x minus 3. Second one, I can factor out a negative 4. And I'm left with x minus 3. So this one does factor by grouping because what I get in the parentheses is the same. So this factors into x minus 3, 9x squared minus 4. Okay, so if I set those equal to 0 and solve, I would get x equals 3 for the first one. Okay, now if I solve the second one, the first thing I would do would be to add 4. Then I would divide by 9. Okay, then to get rid of a square, we do the square root. Anytime you solve an equation and you do a square root, you have to have plus or minus. And then the square root of 4 is 2. Square root of 9 is 3. Okay, now if this would not come out perfectly and you're left with a square root, that's not a rational 0. So you would just forget about that part. Or if you had to take the square root of a negative, you would forget about that part because that's not a rational 0. So my zeros to this problem are negative 2, 3, positive 2/3, and negative 2/3. So I'm going to write just like plus or minus. Excuse me. Okay, that's going to get you through the first part of your 2-5, which was page 179. Okay?